with your mock scores and your
Khushi, also sorry to
yeah.
disturb.
So
Could you please turn on your video? Like it's
yeah, yeah.
not
Sorry,
on.
sorry, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Forgot. Yeah. Am I visible?
Yes, yes, you're visible.
Can you all see me? Yeah. Okay. So I know it might be scary that it's just 4 months away. The exam is 4 months away, and it's highly likely that some of you have prepared really well and you've been consistent with your work. But on the other hand, there might be some of you who have just started, who have just got a hold of the exam, and you might be facing troubles regarding how do we prepare, how others are way ahead of us, how will we ever catch up. So, firstly, please do not worry about that. Even if you have started preparing like a week ago, or if you've been preparing since grade 11, it does not matter, because what matters at the end of the day is how much work and hard work are you putting in the exam. How are you preparing for it? Because everyone has their own way, everyone has their own pace at which they want to move. So I just want to begin by saying that it's just 4 months to CLAT, and 4 months is sufficient amount of time for you to get a hold of yourself, get your efforts, get your preparation in order, and just be consistent with whatever you are currently doing. Or in case you have not started taking it seriously yet, now is the time when you have to take it seriously, because you will be facing slight troubles at the end of the day if you start 2 weeks before the exam. So my advice to you would be to start taking the exam seriously from now on and be consistent with your work. So with that, I think we can go on to the next slide. Yeah. So what should you know by now? Firstly, the structure of the paper. I hope everyone is well aware with the structure of the paper, how it's divided into 5 sections and the number of questions which are expected in each section. If there is someone who does not know how the structure of the paper is, it's 24, 28, 32, 24, 12 with English, that is RC, for 24 questions, then your current affairs for 28 questions, then your legal reasoning for 32, then CR again for 24, and then quants for 12. So that's the format of the paper. So you should know this so that you can understand which strategy works best for you. So that brings me to my second point, the strengths and the weaknesses. So by now you should have a rough idea about which sections in the paper is your forte, which one do you need to score well in, and which sections might be a bit lagging behind when it comes to your preparations. So it's all right, it's fine to have some sections which are which work well for you, in which you score a good amount of marks, and on the other hand there might be some sections in which you don't score so well. It's totally all right, you do not need to have a strong grip over all the 5 sections to be the uh, to get through with the exam. You just have to build up upon your strengths and try to overcome your weaknesses. Don't take your strengths for granted, don't be overconfident about that. If you think that you're scoring like 20 in the English the RC section, then do not let yourself do not let your mind fool you by saying that it's all right, if I'm scoring 20 in my mocks right now, I'll do well the exam on the exam day. That you cannot let that assumption come in between your preparations. You have to keep track of how you are scoring in all the sections, because you never know which section might, if a section if you think is easy for you right now might be difficult for you on the exam day. So do not be overconfident about your strengths. Having said that, with regards to your weaknesses, don't be underconfident about them. You never know when you might just know the correct answer, and because you are underconfident, you might just feel that okay, this cannot be the answer. You have to trust your instinct, you have to believe in yourself first. So you need to have a good balance between your strengths and weaknesses, because all the sections of the paper are important for you to get a good rank in the on the ultimate day. Now bringing this brings me to my next point about reading. So I think it's common for everyone to tell you that you need to be a good reader for preparing efficiently, for being consistent with your work. So that is important. Reading is quite important. You need to have a good reading speed. What does that exactly mean? Everyone tells you that you need to develop a good reading speed. You need to read the passages without taking your own sweet time. You need to read it in like less than 1 minute, I think, something of that sort. But what does this exactly mean? Reading is not just reading the passage without comprehending it. Reading means that as you read the passage, you need to understand what the author is saying or what the question is asking. The number one rule of efficient reading is that once you've read a passage, if you've dedicated, for example, if you've dedicated a minute and a half to it, after dedicating 1 minute to it, you cannot go back to the passage again to understand what was the point of the author. That you need to do simultaneously when you are reading the passage. So, for example, if I've read a passage and then someone asks me, so what's the argument? What's the point the author is trying to make? I should be able to say that in the first instance. I should not be going back to the text to identify the author's argument. So that is what efficient reading is. Now you may take a minute to read the passage. You may take 2 minutes to read the passage. But what matters is that if you're reading it in a minute and you're not understanding what the author is saying, ultimately you're spending more than a minute when you attempt the questions when you have to go back to the passage several times. But if you are taking 2 minutes to understand the passage, to read it thoroughly, and then if you're able, then you'll be able to answer the questions in a consistent manner, in the sense that you will not need to refer to the text back and forth. You won't need to go back to the text every time you come across a new question. So that will ultimately save your time in the long run. So you have to understand that perspective when it comes to the exam. And okay, this brings me to time allocation. Reading and time allocation go side by side. You, if for example, if there are 6 questions and a 500 word passage, you can give it a total of 6 to 7 minutes, I'm assuming, because the main time constraint comes when you have to read the 500 word passage. It does not come when you have to attempt the questions. Attempting the questions should be quick once you've read the passage and you've understood what the author is trying to say. If if you are spending more time on attempting the questions rather than on reading the passage, if that ratio is skewed, then that means that you are not approaching it correctly. You need to understand that reading the passage is more important than the questions which follow, because ultimately your score will depend on your understanding of the passage, which means that you need to give more time to reading it rather than spending time on the questions. If you've read it for a minute and you're spending 4 minutes on one particular question, then that is not desirable. That this is what you need to understand, because ultimately it's the passage, the understanding of the passage, which will help you score marks. So I hope that works. So I hope that makes sense to everyone, because it's really important that you understand this ratio between spending time on the passage, reading the passage, and spending time on the questions. That's really important for your preparations. Now, the strategy. So, okay, so this is something I really wanted to elaborate upon. If, for example, a friend of yours who's also giving the CLAT exam tells you that, you know what, starting with English and then starting with RC and then moving to quant and then reasoning and then CR and ultimately GK works best for me. It is the best strategy. It is helpful in managing the 2 hours. It's a really nice equitable distribution of my time, and so on and so forth. And because you get influenced by what your friend is saying, you decide to opt that same strategy for yourself. What you miss out on is that strategy is for your friend and not for you. You cannot adopt someone else's strategy just because it works out for them. It is not necessary that it will work out for you if it is working out for them. You need to understand that because your strengths and your weaknesses are different from the ones which your friend has, it means that your strategy will also be different. Now that does not mean that you two can't have the same strategy. What I'm trying to say is that do not get influenced just because your just because something works for your friend and you want to, and that friend is scoring bigger, that friend is scoring more than you. So you think that okay, it's maybe because the strategy my friend is using is the reason why he's scoring more than me. No, that's not the case. The reason why he is scoring more than you is because he is distributing his strengths and weaknesses in a manner which works out for him. It is not necessary that it will work out for you. So please understand that you need to form your own strategy. Now, I can't really tell you by when should you have a strategy ready. I'm not asking you to have a strategy ready 4 months away from the exam. It's highly likely that the strategy which you ultimately use in the paper, which you ultimately employ, is the one which is very different from what you had been constantly doing. So my advice to that would be that you test yourself, you try different strategies, you see in which ones are you facing difficulties, which one is making it more convenient for you, it is making the paper format a bit, the structure making it a bit convenient and easy for you. So in that sense, it's highly likely that the strategy comes to you a day or two before the exam or before the last mocks you take. So it's all right if you do not have a particular way of approaching the paper right now. You can take your time, test some variations, try it out, and then ultimately decide on which strategy works for you. So I think with this we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So the first section is RC, reading comprehension. Now, as I already said, that RC requires you to have a focused understanding of the passage. Now, this means that you cannot go back and forth between different questions as they come from the same passage. You should not be if the passage has said something and you've understood what the passage is saying, then the contextual questions should be easy. Okay, you might refer to the passage just to cross check about some when it comes to some technical questions like who is the author or something of that sort. But apart from that, to understand the context of the passage, you should not be reading the entire 500 word passage again. So what you can do when you are reading is concentrate on the context of the passage in which the author is trying to make. So what does that mean? By context, I mean that if the author is talking about something sorrowful, so you can understand the environment in which the author is making his arguments, making the descriptive claims he's making. You can understand by the context of the passage. You can sense the tone of the passage when it comes to this. So that makes the questions easier. So in CLAT 2024, there was a passage, there was a question which was craved out at the end, but there was this really intriguing question in which he asked the examiner asked that by the billowing trees or something of that, I don't know if I'm using the term right, but by the billowing trees, what is the author signifying? Now, what do billowing trees mean? They denote something gloomy, they denote something sad. So the options had happy, joyous, something also. Three options were had like a positive note to it, whereas one option had a negative element in it. So with that, you can understand that the author is actually writing it in a sad, lamentful environment. So this is really important for you. So understanding the context will help you answer the questions. It will not, so you can easily eliminate certain options when they mention a theme or a context which is totally different from what the author is making. So when you read, when you employ focused reading, then you will be easily able to identify the context, and ultimately you will be able to answer the questions without thinking too much about it. It will make your job, your task easier. So that's the emphasis on context and the identification of theme. Now, vocabulary. Many a times the consortium will test you on certain terms which you may not be familiar with right now. How do you improve that? So obviously, I'm assuming that all of you are reading newspapers right now. If you are not, then I would highly recommend you to start reading them. So newspapers are one way to go about it. Secondly, if you enjoy reading, or even if just pick up any article, any magazine next to you, and just read for like, 20 minutes a day, maybe, if you have the time for it. Once you get into the habit of reading, it goes a long way. It not only helps you develop your vocabulary, but it also helps you navigate through the passage in a convenient manner. So, if that way, reading is really important, and reading outside your comfort zone is also very important. So, for example, if you like reading fiction books, that does not mean that you will only read fiction books. What if the consortium tests you on a non-fiction passage? So that is why you need to have an understanding of all sorts of passages. You need to read all categories of uh, passages. So by that, I mean, maybe it can be a magazine article, it can be a blog post, it can be some philosophical articles. So it can be all sorts of things. Once you get into the habit of reading such variety of books or articles or whatever you might call it, you will observe that your vocabulary has started improving. It You will find it easier to understand the terms without knowing the exact meaning of it, in the sense that by the context of it, you'll be able to identify what the word means. You'll have a rough understanding of what it means, and then you'll be able to answer the questions as well. So, in this way, you can approach reading comprehension. In my opinion, it is a scoring section because it does not involve a lot of analytical reasoning. It is mostly direct. Sometimes maybe the examiner texts you on some themes or some arguments, but that is mostly in critical reasoning. So it's not likely for the consortium to test you on such analytical questions in the reading comprehension section. So in that way, reading comprehension is really scoring, and you should all try to score at least above 18, more than 18 also, like at least 18 is like a benchmark you should try to aim for, because it is a scoring section and it will help you boost your scores. So if any of you guys have any questions regarding any particular section, or any questions in general, just let me know. And if I'm going too fast, let me know that as well. So I think we can move on to the next section with this. Yeah, current affairs. I know many of you are dreading this. Even I dreaded this section when I was preparing for my exam. And it was the section in which I scored the lowest for, I think, practically most of the most in practically most of my mocks. So I resonate with you when it comes to this section. So do not worry. If I can do it, then so can you. It's not that big of a deal. It's highly overrated in my opinion, now that I have seen the exam and have attempted it. So it's fine. Even if you are not aware of anything which is happening right now in the nation or abroad, then it's okay. You still have 4 months. You can still do it. So how do we start? We start by making it a um, making the aim of aiming to read the newspapers every day. It's making it religious. Just you have to read it every day. There is no turning back when it comes to skipping, when it comes to reading newspapers, because it is really critical. It is really important for you to read them on a daily basis and make your own notes from it and understand what's going on in the world, because you CLAT does not give you a definite syllabus, and current affairs is a vast subject. So you can be tested on practically anything. You can be tested on Ukrainian president's ex job, which was he was a stand-up comic, or you can even be tested on Jawaharlal Nehru's speech. So it's you really don't have any syllabus when it any definite syllabus when it comes to current affairs. So make it your aim, make it a ritual that you will read the newspapers every day. You will and opt for newspapers such as the Hindu and the or the Indian Express. I think the NLTI must have told you this, and the Hindu and the Indian Express are the primary newspapers we refer to, because other newspapers might reflect some political bias. So just focus on these two newspapers. These newspapers have really good quality editorials, which the consortium also extracts its passages from. So they will be beneficial to you for the exam. Now, coming to editorials, how do you approach them? An editorial is something which can be an editorial can be tested even in the RC section. It can be tested even in the CR section, and it might have an analysis of some particular law or anything which can be tested in the current affairs section as well. So the editorials are really important, and understanding the editorial is crucial for you to ace the examination. How do you approach an editorial? You first read the title. You ask yourself, why did the author title this piece as XYZ? Because many a times you see that questions ask you, give a suitable title for this piece. So if you analyze it on your own, you will begin to understand, you'll identify the thinking pattern behind the naming of the editorials, and ultimately you get a grasp of what the how the naming system works. Also, if if you have not made your own GK notes yet, please start working on them. Your own notes will help you the most on D-Day, because it is your understanding of what is going on. It will help. It is the most customized GK Gazette you can get, which has been authored by you yourself. So start working on them. Apart from that, NLTI gives you the GK Gazettes, the compendium, which is really helpful. It is really detailed, and it covers a vast range of topics, which will help you understand which topics are critical for your preparations. And also the weekly GK MIT is the most important topics. These will these kind of navigate your preparations in the sense that they give you a list of topics which are imperative, which are highly likely to be tested upon. So going through that and identifying the important topics is something you need to do. You cannot you cannot think that I'll score highly in the other sections and I'll not work too hard for current affairs. You cannot do that. I know that is a strategy which many students opt for. They try to do that, but it is just something you cannot skip. It's 28 marks, and you need those 28 mark you need at least above 22, 23. You need to at least aim for that much, and obviously go higher than that. If current affairs is your strong section, you need to make the most out of it. So yeah, it is not uh it is just a mountain which you need to climb, and it's not that difficult. It can be done. It is you The answer to current affairs cannot be that, because it is so vast. It encompasses literally everything which happens in the world. You cannot skip current affairs based on this reasoning. You cannot use that. Then you'll just be putting yourself through trouble at the last moment. So please start working on current affairs, and you can start with the editions from maybe May onwards, so that you at least cover the news from May to December. I think first December is exam, so May to November. So yeah, that is how you should be approaching current affairs. Of course, goes without saying that you should do what works out the best for you, but please do not ignore current affairs in your preparations. So with that, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, legal reasoning. I know most of you are aspiring lawyers. Some might want to pursue UPSC after the CLAT exam, after getting into an NLU. But legal reasoning is something which might seem too intrinsic to you. It might seem too obvious to you. but you need to make it clear to yourself that you cannot go beyond the legal principles which have been mentioned in the passage. If the passage talks about theft, okay, if the legal principle is regarding theft, you cannot confuse yourself with your external knowledge about robbery, thinking that they are synonymous, and then you'll ultimately end up marking the incorrect option and lose yourself 0.25 marks. So the first rule is not to employ any sort of external knowledge. Please stick to the passage. Please stick to the principles which are being discussed in the passage. The answers to the legal reasoning questions are really simple. They are literally a derivation of the ideas which have been mentioned in the passage. So it is not something too difficult. You do not need to learn the laws to approach legal reasoning, because they will give you the passage, they will give you the relevant sections and the articles. So don't do all that. What you should be doing is just understanding the principle and applying the idea, applying the rules and the exceptions to the scenarios at hand. So to do that, you need to read the passage in an inspectional manner. What does that mean? It means that unlike critical reasoning, where you have to analyze what the author is saying as you go through the passage, in legal reasoning, you should just by the by reading it, you should just have a rough idea of what the principle is. You don't need to deeply delve into the analysis, in the sense that what is the author trying to say, or what's the theme. You don't need to do all that in legal reasoning. It's pretty simple and straightforward. All you need to do is understand this relevant principle, understand what are its exceptions, what are the criteria which have to be met for for its application, and then move to the questions. In legal reasoning, you have to understand that sometimes the most minute of the facts might just change the entire game. So for that, you need to carefully just make note of what are the what are the situations in which the principle will not be applicable. If the law is an Indian law, and the situation is John working in McDonald's, New York, then you can't apply the Indian law there. Just because the passage has given you a set of legal principles, they and if they have specified that it is an Indian law applicable to Indian citizens and so on, and if an Indian citizen XYZ, you cannot apply it to John, an American citizen. Even though John has committed a theft, you cannot apply the Indian law, legal provisions on an American citizen if the passage says that these laws are applicable to Indian citizens. So such differences, which might escape your eye, these little minute things need to be taken care of, because legal reasoning will primarily test you on this. So for that, you need to employ inspectional reading, where you just need to have a clear mind and make note of what are the important facts, what are the important aspects of the principle. Now, coming to the concept of legal principles. Now, you don't need to know the law too much beforehand to approach the questions, but you do need to understand that there's generally a pattern, like generally a set of principles which the consortium tests you on. Maybe if, just for example, take negligence as an example of a legal principle which the consortium might test you on. Now you know that negligence is a commonly tested topic. So just have a rough conceptual clarity on what negligence is, what are its exceptions, and just understand the concept behind it. You don't need to know the intricacies of it, but you at least need to have some clear understanding of negligence. Don't confuse it with other things. Like you might confuse negligence with fraud or something of that sort. Just don't do that. Just have a clear conceptual clarity on such principles. And coming to the third point, which is a careful analysis of the options given in the paper. So many a times it might be, is John liable? Yes, reason A. No, no, reason B. Yes, reason C. Now, if the answer is yes, and if in a hurry you take reason A instead of the correct reason, which is the reason C, then you'll skip out on you'll miss your uh, chance at scoring decently in the paper, because in a hurry you did not analyze the options, the set of options which had been given. You might just choose A, thinking that okay, I know he is liable, but you did not read the entire option on why is he liable or why is he not liable. So to do that, you need to go through all the options. Don't be in a hurry. Don't see the word yes, he's liable and just mark it on your OMR sheets. Don't do that. Just analyze it carefully and understand which of the two conflicting options are to be chosen, and what's the reasoning behind the option which you have chosen. Once you analyze that carefully, you'll be approaching the section in a rightful manner. Just don't be in a haste and miss out on of this the miss out on the scoring part of the paper, because legal reasoning can be really scoring. Just like English, just like RC, it's straightforward. It's not that complicated. It just tests you on the principles which it has given according to a student who is in class 12 or maybe a year above. But other than that, it is not that complicated. So you do not need to worry about it. So with that, can we go to the next slide? Okay. Yeah. So logical reasoning. In contrast to legal reasoning, logical reasoning requires you to employ the tactic of analytical reading. By this, I mean that once you start with the passage, you carefully analyze it as you read it, as you complete the passage. By the end of your analytical reading, you should have identified the key arguments, the premise, the conclusion, and the sub arguments which are supporting the key arguments. You should have a rough idea about this your by the end of your reading of the passage. Because if you're not able to identify these four elements of any critical reasoning passage, then it is highly likely that you're approaching the section in an incorrect manner. So analytical reading requires you to somewhat summarize the passage in your own words, and identify the critical elements in it, such as the main argument, the premise, the evidence supporting the author's arguments. So all this you'll be able to do once you've read it analytically. So yeah, so that's the first part. Now coming to this second part, you need to avoid traps. Now, what do these traps signify? For example, the passage is about something which happened in the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, you have experienced the pandemic, you've lived through it, you have your own opinion on it. If the if one of the answers in the passage says something like, the author argues that COVID 19 had a negative impact on the global population because many of the workers lost their jobs. Now you know this is true, and you know that this argument makes sense, but you are falling into the trap when you confuse your own self with the arguments made by the author. If this option is not at all related to the argument which the author is making, which is maybe about vaccines and COVID, if you're confusing the passage which is on vaccines in the COVID-19 pandemic, if you're confusing the author's arguments about that with the employment issue which arose in the COVID-19 pandemic, then you are making the mistake of falling into a trap. You know that this option is true in the sense that it is true in general, but it is not relevant to the facts at hand. It is not relevant to the author's argument which the passage is making. So So you need to avoid falling into these traps. And lastly, you need to maintain the fine line between the author's opinion and your own opinion. Maybe you are not supportive of the author's opinion. Maybe you have some other views. Maybe you don't feel that the author's arguments make sense. You have to distance yourself from your opinion when it comes to the CLAT exam. You need to get into the mind of the author when you approach the logical reasoning section, because the examiner is testing you on your analytical ability to identify the author's arguments. The examiner is not asking you for your opinion, for your arguments on the subject matter. The examiner is asking you for your understanding of the author's arguments, your understanding of the author's key, your understanding of the author's key point. So you please maintain your distance from your own opinion when you approach this particular section. So with that, I think we can go to the next slide. Quants, right? I know many of you are really scared about how will you approach this section. Many of you do not like maths, but trust me, the quants which the consortium tests you on, it's not really those complicated trigonometric equations or some complicated calculations on really difficult subjects. It's basic algebra, it's basic arithmetic. It is not that complex. It by far, I think, class 9 maths or class 10 maths by far, that's an exaggeration. But yeah, how can you work yourself through it? It's firstly you need to have conceptual clarity. You need to know how ratio and proportions work. You need to know how percentages work. You need to know if the question is saying that how much percent more than xyz, then you need to know which figure will come in the denominator, which will come in the numerator. So these concepts need to be cleared before the exam. So please just go through the mocks NLTI makes. Go through the answer key. Go through how the examiner has approached the question. What's the way of doing it? Because many times you might just be doing extremely long calculations which take up your time, when there's a really simple and straightforward way of doing the same sum. So with that, you need to understand how to present your data in a more simplified manner. If the passage gives you a bunch of data, if it gives you data on uh, cricketers playing for South Africa, cricketers playing for India, the scores made by individual cricketers, and so on and so forth. So you need to understand that there is too much data in this question, and if you don't simplify it in your rough work, then you might just be wasting too much time in just identifying the data which you need for the questions. So you need to understand how to present the data which has been given in the sum in a simplified manner. You can make tables. You can assume some variables such as x or a for certain unknown figures. With that, you can simplify the data and then work through the sum. So that's something really important which you should be doing. Now, coming to the formulae, you need to know what are the basic formulas when it comes to maybe ratio proportion, when it comes to simple interest, when it comes to compound interest, because these formulas won't be given to you in the paper. You need to know them beforehand. So just go through the answer keys which the mocks have, and just check out the formulas which have been used at certain sums, and then try solving questions which require you to apply such kinds of formulas. And by practicing these kind of sums and by practicing the application of such formulas, you will be able to score decently in this section. Also, you should have some um, you should develop the skill of quick math. You need to know that you don't every time need a pen and a paper to calculate basic additions or subtractions. You can just do it by looking at it. If you are right, if you're in the habit of writing it down and doing it, then you might just be wasting time. So please try developing your ability in quick math, because it will help you in the exam. Also, what I want to mention here is that don't waste too much time on a particular sum. If there are two passages in quantitative aptitude, and one of the questions in one of the passages, it's really complex and you're not able to understand it, and but you think that since I have presented my data, since I have spent so much time on it already, I should try to approach this, or else my efforts are in vain. Many a times you might feel that, even I have felt that. But what I want to tell you is that if you spend more time on it, if it's too complicated and you're spending more time on it, then you're just wasting the time you have for the rest of the paper. You might just be spending too much time without the necessary, without what it will give you back in returns. So if if a particular question seems too complicated, if it seems too complex, just move on, go to the next question, try solving it at the end of the paper if you have time. But please don't waste too much time on one particular question. It will not help you if trying to score 1 mark, you might just miss out on the four others which you could have scored had you skipped wasting time, have you skipped solving that particular question. So yeah. So what I want to say is that CLAT's quantitative aptitude section is not that difficult as it might as it is perceived to be. It is not like some IIM math or anything of that sort. It is really simple. It is not. It just requires you to apply basic formulas and basic methods in your paper, and I think it is not that big of a deal, and you can do it. Just don't spend too much time on it. If it's for 12 marks, don't end up spending 30 minutes on it. If it's for 12 marks, just don't spend more than 15 minutes on it. Because if you are spending more than 15 on it, you're just wasting time, and you can approach the other sections and score better in those rather than this. So with that, I think the next slide. Yeah. So overall, what can you do? Firstly, attempt the NLTI mocks regularly. Just make it a deal that you will attempt these mocks. You will sit for 2 hours and you will give these mocks, no matter how no matter how how much you feel that you are lacking behind. If you feel that you are not ready for a mock yet, don't worry, just give it, because it will help you at the end of the day. You will not realize it now, but you will realize it after the exam, that how important these mocks are, because they give you a they give you a lens to what's coming. They are really insightful. So please don't skip out on them, just attempt them regularly. And there are two steps in any mock giving process. The first being attempting it, the second analyzing it. Many students do the first one without analyzing it. The second step is equally important. You need to know where have you gone wrong. You need to know what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, because without analyzing your mock, you're just attempting it without any benefit at the end, because you're just giving it, you're not understanding where are you going wrong, where are you applying the logic incorrectly. So it's really important that you maintain some sort of analysis sheet where you can write your scores, where you can write your individual sectional scores, how many questions you got wrong, how this impacted your entire paper. So in this way, this analysis will help you keep track, keep a flow of how, in which direction is your preparation heading. And so by 1st December, you will be able to you'll know what your strengths and weaknesses are, because you've analyzed your mistakes of the past. And so your paper will go in a better manner than expected. Also, there is the 3 months mentorship course which NLTI offers. For those of you who don't know, this course gives you allots a mentor to you, who is there for you, who is there for you, there for your doubts, your questions. You can ask them anytime, and they will help you out. They will give you personalized guidance. And given the fact that these come from India's number one law school, it's all the more reason for you to apply for this course, because these people have given the exam, they have sat for it, and now they are at the NLU you, I think most of you desire. So you can opt for this course. They will help you with your preparations in all the sections. They will give you the tips and the tricks required for you to ace the exam. They'll help you in your strengths and weaknesses, developing your strengths and overcoming your weaknesses. So in this way, you really have a personal guide to the exam. So I think that's really beneficial for the for all of you. And next, the balance between your school exams and CLAT. So I know many of you are worried about how are you going to approach both of them simultaneously, given the fact that many of you are sitting for the board examinations next year, and CLAT falls right between, I think, 1st December. So maybe your pre-boards will be going on at that time, or so on and so forth. So you need to understand that CLAT is more important than your school exams. This does not mean that your school exams are not important. They are equally important. They are also important, but it's just that CLAT overshadows these exams, because it CLAT is the exam which will decide your future, your career, and not the school exams. So if you do want to uh, get good scores in both, then you should definitely aim for that, but not at the cost of letting your CLAT preparations take a hit. Just uh, make a schedule, follow it, in which you give a good ample amount of time to CLAT, and then you have the time for your school exams as well. It is not something which you cannot do. It is really, it's not that big of a deal. It is overhyped. So it's not that difficult to get a balance between the two. It can be done. It's just up to your willingness and your this it's up to your willingness to put in the work and the amount of work you want to put in, because ultimately it's your exam, and it is dependent on how you want to approach both these exams. um, yeah, so with that, you need to understand that you need to maintain your cool, your calmness, maintain a good composure, patience when it comes to your preparations, because if you are in a stressful state, if you are just panicking about the exam, if you're just feeling low, if you're feeling that I cannot do this, you need to know that you can. It is not something which you cannot do. It is really, at the end of the day, it just comes down to your willpower to go through the preparations, go through the hard work. Because if you're cool and calm, then you'll have a clear head through which you can understand the concepts, you can understand what's going on in class, you can understand what your mentors are saying. But if you're always in a stressful mode, you will not be fully able to comprehend what's being said, and then you will miss out on important tactics, you'll miss out on the important concepts which are discussed. So just be cool and calm, and then you'll have an upper hand over those who are always in a stressful mode. Also, don't think too much about your competition. Don't think too much about how they are preparing, how they are approaching the paper. If you see someone dedicating, I don't know, maybe like 15 hours a day to uh, school exams and CLAT and so on and so forth, don't think that you are lacking behind just because someone else is studying so much, someone else has put in so much work. You do not need to worry about your competition at such a stage. You just need to think about how you have prepared, what you are doing. Are you making the most out of your skills, out of your abilities? Once you get an understanding of yourself, then you'll be able to ace the exam in a better way. Don't think too much about your about your competition, because at the end of the day, it's your skill, it's your hard work which comes into play, and not the work of others. So don't be dependent on them. I think that's it. I think with that, we come to the end of the presentation, and all the best, guys. I hope to see you all next year on campus. And if you have any doubts, you can ask me right now, or drop me a message, or anything works. Oh, okay. I just saw the chat. I'll just go through it. Um, पैसेज कभी-कभी समझ ही नहीं सकता. Right. So with regarding the passages, as I said, try reading all sorts of passages. Try reading books. Try reading articles on maybe psychology. Try reading articles on sports. All sorts of them, because you never know which passage might be tested, which might come in the paper. So once you understand all sorts, once you read all kinds of passages, you'll be able to understand uh, different themes, and then you'll be able to understand the passage as well. Okay. Marked. Did you ever refer to the marked newspapers, or you read the full newspaper? So it depends. If it's some critical topic, like in 2023, since the G20 was held, so G20 was really important. So I read that in detail. But if it comes to, so if it's some it's some minor topic which is not that relevant, you can just refer to the marked portions. But apart from that, I would recommend that you go through as many topics as you can, because you never know what might just come in the exam. Uh, Quantitative aptitude, as I said, just understand the approach which the answer key has. Just understand how which formulas have been applied, why has the data been presented in a table form, in a tabular format, and not in in a descriptive format. There's a reason for that. Try modeling your answers to to the table which has been given in the answer key. With in that way, you can get through quants as well. It's not that difficult. um Hold up. The maximum number of articles one should read in a day. Don't overburden yourself. Just see how much are you being able to do. If you read like maybe 20 articles, and if beyond 20 you are unable to understand what's going on, stop at 20. Don't just do 25 articles for the sake of it, because ultimately you're wasting time and you're stressing yourself out for no reason. Just if your capacity is at 20, just stick to 20. Gradually you might try to increase it, but don't overburden yourself. Just see what works out the best for you. How to prioritize backlog according to the months. All right. So the approach to this should be that as you approach December, that is 1st December, by then you should at least uh have October. So okay, August, September, October. August, September, and October are the crucial months for GK, because by November the paper is usually set. Like by mid-November, I'm assuming it's usually set. So the 3 months preceding November, those are really important. Once you've covered the MITs which NLT has given to you on those in these 3 months, then you can go ahead with the months before that. Just finish the later ones before going to the ones for maybe for example, maybe so what I'm trying to say is that an event which happened in October is more important than an event which happened in January, because your exam is in December. So by that logic, you should clear the backlogs of October, November, September, October, and November first, and then we should move on to May, June, July, and so on. What should be the ideal time for reading the newspaper? Whatever times works the best for you. You don't need to be up at 7 a.m. to read the newspaper. You don't need to read it at 10 at night as well. Whatever time is suitable for you, you can just read it. What should be the ideal mock score now? Don't worry so much about the mock scores, they fluctuate all the time. You it's very likely that you might be scoring in 50s right now, your peers might be scoring in 80s right now, and that stresses you out. Don't do that. Gradually work yourself way up, and then you, by the end of November, that is like by the end of your preparations, you should be having a rough idea about the paper, and your mock scores will never truly reflect the scores you get in the paper, in the exam. They are just there for you to understand how the passages might be structured, how the questions might be structured, how can you approach these questions. So don't worry about scores too much. Just analyze where you're going wrong, because mocks are there for you to identify your strengths and weaknesses. They are not for you to get a rough idea of how much you might how much you might end up scoring in the exam, because mock scores are not like absolutely reflective of what you might score in the exam. They are there for your preparation, they're there for your development. Okay. How many maths questions must we practice or solve every day? Since math is for 12 marks, I would recommend you to not dedicate more than an hour to it every day, because the questions are really simple. They are not that difficult. They are not your differentiation or your logarithms or anything of that sort. They are really simple. You just need to develop quick math, as I said. Just uh, get your calculations right, just understand what's being said, what's the data, and once you do that, you'll be able to score fairly in the section. How much time should we allot to read the legal passages, and how much time should we take while answering the questions? So I can't really give you a definite amount of time which you can use, but what I will recommend is that you understand the concept clearly. You don't need to understand the history behind a legal principle if it's given in the passage, because the questions won't really ask you on the history of the law, but they will rather ask you on the application of the law. So in that way, you can skim through those details which might seem irrelevant, but do not skim through the principle. Do not skim through its definitions, its application, the criteria to be met. You can skim through the other parts of it, maybe the history of it, or who authored the law. In that sense, you can skip all that. Um, okay. I have spoken about how to tackle unfamiliar passage. It's by reading all sorts of themes. There are no tricks to deal with the logical section. All you need to do is have a clarity on what does a premise mean? What does the author's conclusion mean? You might be confused between the two. You might misunderstand the author's argument to be the author's conclusion. Don't do that. Get your concept sorted, get it cleared, and then you will see that you are approaching the. Then you will find the questions to be easier for you. Were your marks in mocks consistent? No, my mock scores were not really consistent. Uh, as it is, does No, mock scores do not translate into the same marks and ranks. As I said, it's it's really different on the exam day. So don't worry too much about your mock scores being reflective of your CLAT scores. I did not read every page of the Hindu. The titles are sufficient for you to identify which passages are important, which might not be important. So that's fine. No, I'm not a dropper. How to remember years, GK important. So, with regards to years, you don't need to remember all the years, just the ones which are like really important. Like if it's, for example, the G20, so you need to know the year in which it was founded. You don't need to know the exact year in which it was a G20 conference was held in Paris. You don't need to know that. You just need to know the basic years, the critical ones, the more important ones. So that you will identify as you go through your preparations and as you go through the compendium and the MITs which have been provided. Uh, Less important years. So you can't really say which years are important and which years are not important. All I'm trying to say is that the years which are like important undoubtedly with like foundational years or those things that you should be knowing, and the less important years, there is a reason why they've been given, so you delve into that, you understand why has LNTI asked you about this particular year? Why couldn't it ask on any other year? Once you develop that understanding about why this particular year has been tested, what's the significance of it, then you'll be able to identify how to approach the concept of years in GK. You'll be able to identify which years are relatively important and which are not so important. Just if you analyze them more carefully, if you analyze the passage, the context in which the year has been asked, you will be able to solve it. What exactly do we need to do with analyzing the mock? I think I'll take this as the last question. Um, firstly, I would recommend you to have an analysis sheet in which you write, in which you categorize your marks in the five sections. You write how many questions you attempted, how many did you get wrong, how many did you get right, what's the score you got from that section. So once you have that sheet ready, and once you track your different mock scores, you will be able to understand that where are you lacking behind in your approach, where where can you score better, where can you fortify your strengths and get an improved score. Once you categorize your scores, then you'll be able to then your analysis becomes beneficial. You should also make note of the kind of questions you are getting wrong. If they reflect a pattern, then it is something worrisome, because you need to know that you're making the same mistake again and again. So you can reach out to your mentors, which they you have in the mentors program, and they will help you out with it. You can ask anyone for it. So get those concepts cleared, and then you'll see gradually that your mock scores improve as you analyze them and understand where you go wrong. uh, Mock analysis notes, I actually don't have them with me right now. But I'll try looking for it. If I get hold of the sheet, I will share it, and you can get a rough idea. Average time to devote to reading newspaper, it depends on how are you approaching it. If you are reading the editorials, then you should read it at a speed at which you should be approaching your CR and RC sections. If you're reading it for current affairs, then you should make note of the important facts which the article is giving you, the guests invited, or the location of the event, something of that sort. And then it just depends on how many topics are you covering from that one newspaper. I think with that, the questions are over. So i'll I'll wrap it up with this, I guess. All the best, guys, for your exam. You can reach out to NLTI whenever you face any difficulties. We will help you out, and I hope to see you all on campus next year. Okay. All right. Good night, guys. Take care. Don't worry too much. It will be all right. All the best.